Let me tell you a story. It's not the one you know, not the tale of a boy with a scar who defied a dark lord. That story has already been told, hasn't it? In whispers and in thunder. In legends carved into stone, and bedtime stories whispered to children tucked beneath enchanted quilts. No, this is what came after. After the battles were fought, and the heroes grew older. When the world thought it had found peace, and magic, real magic, began to change again. Because the truth is, magic never sleeps. It dreams. And sometimes, it remembers. This is the story of Harry Potter, not the boy who lived, but the man who bore a different weight. A whisper of flame long buried. A prophecy lost to dust. A secret locked in the bones of the world. It begins with a forgotten orb, and a single word that doesn't belong to any language still spoken. Ekaresh. And from there, everything, prophecies, flames, memory, even the stars, begins to stir. You'll meet a girl who was never born. A cult that worships not gods, but silence. A gate that breathes beneath the sea. And forces older than Hogwarts itself, returning not to conquer, but to rewrite. So pull the blankets up tight. Keep your wand close. And listen closely. The steady rain fell like a veil over London, blurring the outlines of the city into a ghost of itself. From the top of the Ministry of Magic's Auror office, Harry Potter stood by the tall enchanted windows, watching the storm grind against the skyline. The glass didn't shatter, it never did, but it moaned softly, like it remembered breaking. Harry was 30 now, and time had sketched fine lines around his eyes. His black hair remained unruly, and the famous scar on his forehead, once a source of legend and dread, was now mostly an ache that stirred in his dreams. He was no longer the boy who lived, or the chosen one. He was Harry, Senior Auror, and these days, that title carried more paperwork than glory. Behind him, the Auror office buzzed with the usual blend of magical urgency and bureaucratic delay. Quills scratched against parchment. Magical memos zipped like dragonflies through the air. An intern wrestled a cursed umbrella in the hallway, standard Thursday chaos. Potter, came a clipped voice. Harry turned. Kingsley. Minister Shacklebolt's presence commanded attention. His deep purple robe shimmered with defensive enchantments, and his eyes, always calm, had an edge tonight. "We need you in the Department of Mysteries," Kingsley said without preamble. Now. That was all it took. The old fear, that sharp, cold stab in his ribs, surged up like it had never left. The Department of Mysteries had not changed. It was still silent, echoing, and strange. The revolving doors of black stone slid open soundlessly, revealing the familiar hallway of sealed chambers. Harry walked beside Kingsley, their footsteps swallowed by the velvet dark. "Someone broke into Vault 18, Kingsley said. No alarms. No sign of entry. Just opened. Vault 18. Harry repeated. "Wasn't that sealed after the—" "Yes," Kingsley said, his voice low. "After the war. It was considered too unstable. No one's been in there since, well, since the Veil." Harry's chest tightened. The Veil of Death still haunted his dreams. "Who found it?" he asked. Dawlish. He was doing an inventory sweep. The vault was already open when he got there. Harry nodded. Dawlish was a stubborn old Auror, loyal but wary. If he said the vault was open, it was. They reached the door. It wasn't open now. It pulsed, faintly, like a heartbeat. Black stone, but veins of dull silver rippled just beneath the surface, moving as if the rock were alive. Runes glimmered at the edges, flickering between comprehension and nonsense. "Whatever's inside is resisting us," Kingsley murmured. "We've called in every unspeakable, but—" "I'll go," Harry said, almost before he meant to. Kingsley looked at him sharply. "You sure?" Harry drew his wand. "It's never just about magic with this place. Sometimes, it's about who you are." The door responded to his touch like it remembered him. The silver veins pulsed brightly, then receded. The vault yawned open. The air inside smelled ancient, like dust, metal, and old blood. In the center of the room sat a single pedestal. On it, a glass orb no bigger than a grapefruit shimmered with swirling mist. A prophecy. Harry stepped closer. The mist inside the orb moved oddly. It didn't spin like the others he'd seen. It twisted against itself, coiling like a serpent. The light within was dark gold, pulsing slowly. A plaque at the base read only, FF 1437. Sealed by order of the Watch. Harry frowned. FF. Even the unspeakables don't know, came a voice behind him. Hermione Granger stepped into the room. She wore the grey robes of the Department of Magical Law, her wand already drawn. I came the moment I heard, she said, brushing her wild curls from her face. Harry, this isn't in any of the records. Harry reached out, then stopped. The orb whispered. It wasn't sound. It was deeper, like a voice curling in his mind. Potter. He jerked back. The voice was unmistakable. It had said his name. You heard it too? Hermione asked, eyes wide. Harry nodded. The orb pulsed again, and this time, it spoke another word, foreign, guttural, impossibly old. Ekaresh. Hermione's breath caught. What does it mean? Harry asked. She swallowed. I think it's a dead language. One from before the founding of Hogwarts. Possibly from the First Flame archives. Harry turned to her. You mean the origin of magic? Hermione nodded. Suddenly, the orb shivered. Cracks danced across its surface, but it didn't break. Instead, a beam of golden light lanced upward, carving symbols into the vault ceiling, etching them in flame. They pulsed once, and then the orb went dark. And Harry felt something inside him shift. Like the world had turned ever so slightly out of place. That night, sleep did not come easily. He sat by the fire in Grimmauld Place, the old house creaking around him like a living thing. His tea had gone cold, ignored. He couldn't stop hearing it. Ekaresh. And beneath that, the faintest whisper of something else, like a name. Or a warning. The next morning arrived heavy with mist and silence. Even the portraits in Grimmauld Place seemed subdued, their eyes following Harry with more than the usual blend of suspicion and boredom. Creature shuffled in quietly with breakfast, placing it down without a word, but before he left, he paused and said, Master Potter, the air tastes wrong. Harry stared at him. What do you mean? Creature blinked slowly, old eyes distant. Magic is turning in its sleep. He left without another word. Back at the Ministry, a storm was brewing, not in the skies this time, but among its highest offices. Hermione summoned Harry to the Department of Magical Law, where she had already assembled a wall of books, documents, and spectral projections. Ekaresh, she said, without looking up from the floating runes. It appears in fragments across various obscure texts, but never directly translated. Always linked to something called the 12 Pillars. Harry frowned. Pillars of what? That's just it, she said. No one knows. But all references stop after the second Wizarding Conclave, nearly 1,000 years ago. It's as if history erased them. He leaned over a projection. One of the runes from the vault ceiling glowed faintly. Look at this shape, he said, tracing the outline. It matches the tattoo on that old warlock we caught last year. The one who tried to open the cursed archive in Romania. Hermione's eyes widened. That symbol, it wasn't just for binding magic. It was a gate. A chill ran through the room. 2 days later, the orb disappeared. It didn't explode, it didn't break, it simply ceased to exist. The pedestal it had rested on was empty, cold, as if it had never been there at all. But the carvings on the ceiling remained. Harry returned to the vault. He stood there alone, staring at the flaming runes still suspended in air. When he reached out his wand to touch them, they reacted. the world tilted. A rush of images flooded his mind, cities in ruin, skies aflame, cloaked figures chanting in languages not meant for human tongues. He saw Hermione screaming, Ron falling, and something vast waking beneath the earth. Then it ended. Harry fell to his knees, gasping. He wasn't alone anymore. From the shadows of the vault, a voice emerged. Smooth. Familiar. Potter, said Draco Malfoy, stepping forward. Looks like you found yourself in another prophecy. Harry's wand was in his hand before he even realized it. Malfoy raised an eyebrow and held up both palms. Easy, he said coolly. I didn't come here to duel. What are you doing down here, Malfoy? Harry asked, breath still ragged from the vision. Only unspeakables and auras have clearance. I have clearance, Malfoy replied, stepping further into the vault. Special appointment. Consultant to the Department of Arcane Archaeology. Harry scoffed. Since when? Malfoy smirked, but there was a weariness in his eyes that didn't match the arrogance in his voice. Since I started digging through things the Ministry was too afraid to touch. Turns out, some pureblood legacies are good for more than just keeping the wine cellar stocked. He looked up at the runes above them. So, the rumors are true. You found it. Harry lowered his wand slightly. You know what it is. Not exactly. But I know what it might be. Malfoy walked around the pedestal, his gloved fingers tracing the edge with practiced reverence. My father used to tell me bedtime stories, he said quietly. Not about unicorns or brave knights. He told me about the old flame. The fire that lived in the bones of the earth before Merlin, before Hogwarts. Before wands. He said there were words, the first words, that shaped magic before it was broken and divided. Harry watched him carefully. What do those stories have to do with this? Malfoy looked up at the runes again. Because this, he pointed, is one of those words. A name. A command. A key. Maybe all three. Ekaresh, Harry murmured. Malfoy stiffened. You heard it too, then. They stared at each other for a long, uncertain moment. I thought this was just a legend, Harry admitted. But something's happening. I saw things. In my mind. Visions. You weren't hallucinating, Malfoy said, voice low. They're memories. Or prophecies. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference with ancient magic. Harry exhaled, shaking his head. The orb's gone. Just vanished. The prophecy, it might have activated. Or moved. Or was taken, Malfoy said. Harry narrowed his eyes. By who? Malfoy hesitated. That's what I've been trying to figure out. There's a group, they call themselves the Hollow Flame. Very old. Very secret. They believe the world was once perfect, before structured magic broke it into chaos. They want to go back. Harry stared at him. Go back how? Malfoy met his eyes. By waking what sleeps beneath magic. Over the next week, the world shifted in quiet, terrible ways. A magical storm broke over the Mediterranean, swallowing an entire ship of magical scholars. Wards across Gringotts began to misfire, reacting to something unseen. In the far north, an ancient forest once impervious to all magic turned black and lifeless overnight. And in the ruins of an abandoned abbey in northern Scotland, a sigil was burned into the stone. The same one that hovered in the department vault. The Ministry tried to contain the news, but it spread, as rumors always do. Hermione worked around the clock, poring over texts banned for centuries. Ron, now head of magical security, arranged silent lockdowns in every sensitive Ministry department. And Harry? Harry dreamed. He dreamed of cities made of bone. Of rivers that whispered secrets. Of a vast black sun rising over a world that didn't belong to him. Each time, the voice whispered, Ekaresh. And then, one night, it said something more. Potter! You are the last light before the flame." At sunrise, Harry stood on the cliffs above Tintagel, wind battering his cloak. The sea below roared with the fury of ages. In his hand, he held a letter. It was unsigned. Delivered by a raven with silver eyes. "You seek the truth. You seek the first flame. Come to the hollow hearth. Come alone. Follow the whispers. The veil remembers." Below the message was a single word, burned into the parchment. Ekaresh. Harry folded the letter slowly. Behind him, the sky cracked with thunder. The air on the Cornish coast was sharp as glass, thick with the scent of brine and storms. Harry stood alone at the edge of the cliff, the sky hanging low and sullen above him. The letter was folded in his pocket, but the words burned through the fabric like a brand. Come to the hollow hearth. It was madness, every instinct screamed it. Going alone. No backup. No plan. But the voice in the orb hadn't been just magic, it had been knowing. It had recognized him. And now, somewhere out there, something ancient waited. Harry tapped the enchanted port key in his palm, a small silver coin etched with runes Hermione had reluctantly approved, under protest, and vanished with a soft snap of displaced air. The world reassembled itself in stuttering light. He landed not in some ruin, but in a dense, frozen glade. Trees arched high overhead like cathedral spires, their bark blackened, their leaves long since turned to ash. Snow fell in silence, but it wasn't natural. The flakes hovered before touching the ground, then simply vanished. A path appeared as if summoned by thought. Harry followed. His wand stayed drawn, warmth from the holly and phoenix feather core the only comfort in the growing cold. Half an hour in, a shape emerged ahead, ruins, half swallowed by the earth. A collapsed fortress, once towering and proud, now broken and bleeding memory. Magic clung to it like fog. The hollow hearth. It took effort to cross the wards. They didn't repel him, exactly, they examined him. Peeling through his mind and heart like parchment. Testing. Judging. When he stepped across the threshold, the air changed. He was no longer in England, not truly. This place had no location. No time. Only memory. Stone pillars rose in arcs from the frozen earth, scorched at the tops as if once kissed by a flame too vast to contain. In the center stood a circular dais, and upon it, a woman cloaked in black and blue, her face shrouded by veils of starlight. She did not look up. "You are late, Harry Potter." Harry's hand tightened on his wand. "You sent the letter." "I am the letter. I am the voice. I am what remains of the first circle." She looked up. Her eyes were like moonlight, pale, endless, and utterly empty. "My name was Elira," she said. "Once. Now, I am the last seer of flame." Harry hesitated. "You know about the prophecy." "I am the prophecy," she said softly. "Or rather, its witness." She raised a hand. A flicker of gold and violet light bloomed in the air. A vision took shape, ghostly cities, kings in robes of fire, runes that carved themselves into the fabric of the world. And then, darkness. Fire turned to rot. Light to shadow. And from the void, a flame untouched by time blinked open, like an eye. "The first flame," Elira whispered. It was never a metaphor. It was magic before law. Before limit. Before division. And now. Harry finished the thought. "It's waking up." She nodded. "Because of you." He stepped back. "That's not possible." "You bear the scar of the veil," she said. "It marked you. Not just with Voldemort's curse, but with something older. When you passed beneath the veil's shadow, a part of the first flame saw you." Harry shook his head. "I didn't cross the veil. Sirius did." "Yes. But he left something behind. And you took it with you." Harry staggered back, breath cold in his lungs. "That doesn't make sense." It will. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. There will be 3 who stand at the edge of the flame. 1 who remembers. 1 who forgets. And 1 who burns. Harry whispered, "Which am I?" "You are not one, Harry Potter," Auror said. "You are all 3. Before he could speak again, a thunderclap cracked through the sky. Auror's head snapped up. "They followed you." A spell slammed into the stone beside him. He turned just in time to see a group of black-robed ministry agents burst through a flickering portal, wands raised, eyes wide with fear and urgency. "Potter," one of them barked. "By order of the ministry, you are to stand down and surrender for violation of international magical statutes." Auror raised her hand. Time wavered. Harry didn't hesitate. "Go." "I'll follow." "No," she touched his chest. "You must take this." A small object passed into his hand, a sliver of obsidian with runes etched in blood. "The key," she whispered. "To the chamber beneath the world." Then she turned, faced the agents, and spoke a word Harry didn't understand. Light exploded. Harry was flung backward into the arms of a second portkey hidden in his coat. The world shattered and rebuilt itself in silence. He landed in a glade just outside Ottery St. Catchpole, bruised and gasping. The obsidian shard pulsed in his palm. The first flame had awoken. And it had chosen him. Grimmauld Place had never felt so cold. The house, steeped in shadows and secrets, groaned quietly as if it too knew something was shifting. Harry sat by the hearth in the drawing room, the obsidian shard resting on the table before him, pulsing with a dull red light. He hadn't spoken to anyone since returning from the hollow hearth. Not Hermione. Not Ron. Not Kingsley. The vision, the light, Auror's sacrifice. It had shaken him. The shard was more than a key. It was a piece of something larger, and it throbbed with energy that defied understanding. He stared into the fire, lost in thought, until the sound of the front door slamming open shattered the silence. Harry James Potter. Hermione. She was furious. Harry barely turned before she stormed into the room, Ron on her heels. She was red-faced, her robes dusted with soot and frost. "You vanished," she snapped. "You didn't tell anyone where you were going. The ministry scrambled a search team. Ron thought you were dead." Harry stood slowly. "I had to go." The hollow hearth. "You should have told us," she shouted. Ron stepped forward, voice rough. "We're not kids anymore, mate. You don't get to make the decisions alone." Harry swallowed. "I didn't have a choice." "The prophecy." Hermione pointed to the shard. "That thing is cursed, Harry. Or worse. It's bleeding raw magic. I can feel it from here. Auror gave it to me." Hermione froze. "You met her?" Harry nodded. "She said it's a key. To the chamber beneath the world." The room fell silent. Hermione dropped into a chair. "That's impossible. That's just myth. The chamber was supposed to be sealed before the founding of magical Britain." "She said the first flame is waking," Harry said quietly. "And it remembers me." They worked through the night, cross-referencing the shard's markings with fragments in the Black family library and Hermione's hidden collection of restricted tomes. By morning, she had something. WS the terrain. The magic there is unstable. Alive. A voice from the doorway answered before she could continue. "You'll need me." Draco Malfoy stepped into the light, his traveling cloak dusted with snow. His wand was already out, his expression unreadable. "The Malfoy family once guarded a path through those caves," he said. "It's time I repay a debt." The journey north took them 3 days. Travel had to be magical and secretive. Too many eyes now watched Harry's movements. The entrance to the ancient cave lay within a crevasse hidden under illusions. It opened not with spells, but with memory. Each member of the party had to speak a name lost to them. Ron muttered Fred. Hermione whispered Dobby. Harry said nothing, but the door opened for him anyway. The descent began. The caves beneath the highlands were nothing like the mundane world above. Walls pulsed faintly with trapped memories. Echoes of footsteps danced across paths no one walked. Light flickered where none should exist, and the deeper they went, the more the air smelled of smoke and lightning. They passed through trials, whispers that mimic voices of the dead, illusions of loved ones crying for help. Harry nearly broke when he saw Sirius reaching out from a wall of flame. Malfoy dragged him back. It's not real. Don't let it feed on you. But it felt real. Every step, the chamber fed on who they were. At last, they reached it. A vast, domed cavern unlike anything they had ever seen. In its center stood a door, not of stone or wood, but of living flame. It shimmered like a mirage, flickering with golden red hues. And upon it, the rune from the shard. Harry stepped forward. The shard in his hand glowed, and the door pulsed in response. Voices rose from the flame, deep, ancient, layered with time. Blood calls to blood. The first flame must consume what it first gifted. The ground trembled. The door began to open. And the flame within breathed. The door of flame did not swing open. It inhaled. The fire pulled inward, folding itself like parchment, revealing a void, not black, not lightless, but something else. Like color before it is born. A silence too complete to be natural. It was as if the world had paused its breath, waiting to see who would dare step through. And Harry stepped forward. Not because he knew what waited on the other side, but because he had to. The shard in his hand vibrated with increasing urgency, the rune etched upon it glowing brighter with each passing second. Harry, Hermione said behind him, her voice tight, we don't know what's in there. This could be a trap, Ron finished grimly. Harry turned to look at them, his oldest friends. Their faces were pale, but resolute. Hermione's knuckles were white on her wand. Ron was visibly shaking, but his jaw was set like stone. Behind them, Draco watched with narrowed eyes, hands behind his back, but there was a stillness in his posture, almost reverence. I don't think it's a trap, Harry said. It's something else. Calling. He stepped into the breach. The others followed. There was no transition, no moment of movement, no tunnel, no sense of falling or shifting. One moment they were in the cave, and the next, they stood in a great circular hall that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Above them, the ceiling sparkled with stars, real stars, not paintings, not enchantments. The constellations moved slowly, impossibly, as though the universe itself were just beyond arm's reach. The floor beneath them was obsidian, smooth and warm, etched with flowing script in a dozen ancient languages. As they stepped forward, the symbols shifted, rearranged, and began to glow softly. The hall was empty, except for the flame. It floated at the center, suspended above a stone basin. No source. No fuel. Just flame, living, pulsing, watching. Harry couldn't take his eyes off it. The shard in his hand burned hot. It knows you, Draco murmured beside him. Or thinks it does. Hermione took out her wand. This place, it's not on any magical map. The air is saturated with pure energy. Not just magic, this is pre-magic. It's like we're standing inside a thought that was never finished. Harry approached the flame. It didn't retreat. Instead, it extended a tendril of fire toward him, slow and deliberate. It didn't burn, its heat was warm, yes, but not painful. It was curious. The fire curled around the shard in his hand. And then, visions. A great city of towers made from light and thought. Wizards and witches without wands, their power woven directly from the air. Children born glowing with arcane symbols that pulsed with breath and song. A council. A circle of 12. They spoke words that didn't exist anymore, cast spells without sound or motion. And then, betrayal. One of the 12 broke the pact. The flame, once a gift, became a weapon. The ground split. The stars dimmed. Mountains bled fire. And in the ruins of that first world, they sealed the flame away, deep beneath memory and time. A name echoed through Harry's mind. Varel Toreth. The one who betrayed. Harry staggered back. The flame withdrew, curling like a cat returning to sleep. He turned to the others. It's not just a chamber. It's a tomb. Or a prison. Ron's eyes were wide. That flame, it's alive. It showed you something. Not just showed, Harry said slowly. It remembered. Hermione knelt near the stone basin. These markings, they're part of an incantation. A binding. But it's frayed. Weakened. Draco nodded. Because you opened the gate. You're the first to touch it in centuries. And that may have been enough to wake it. Why me? Harry asked, his voice cracking. Why always me? Draco's expression was unreadable. Because your scar wasn't just Voldemort's mark. It was a doorway. A wound through which something else looked. Harry said nothing. The truth tasted like ash in his mouth. Suddenly, the entire chamber shook. A deep groaning echoed from somewhere far below. The flame flared, not in anger, but in warning. Hermione's eyes snapped open. Something's coming. From the far end of the chamber, stone columns shifted, parting like gates. Figures stepped through. Not living. Not dead. They wore robes of ash and metal, faces hidden by veils of gold. Their eyes burned with the same golden fire Harry had seen in the orb. They moved in unison, and when they spoke, it was as one. The bearer has awakened the flame. The seal is broken. The circle must rise. Draco stepped forward, wand at the ready. Who are you? We are the remnants. The guardians of sleep. You were not meant to enter. You were not meant to see. Too late for that, Ron muttered. The remnants raised their hands. Hermione shouted, Protego Maxima. The air shimmered as a dome of protective magic surrounded them. Harry dove forward, reaching for the flame again. He didn't know what he was doing, only that the shard pulsed faster with each breath, as if it too recognized danger. Harry! Hermione screamed. They're breaking through. And then, he threw the shard into the flame. The effect was immediate. The fire inhaled again, but this time, it howled. Light exploded outward. The remnants shrieked, their forms unraveling like paper in wind. The chamber trembled, stars above flickering madly. And the flame spoke. Not in words. In understanding. Harry collapsed to his knees. And within his mind, a voice, vast and terrible and ancient, whispered. You are the last spark. The world ends not in darkness, but in light unrestrained. Then all went silent. When Harry awoke, the others were gone. He stood alone in a shattered hall, the flame no longer visible. And in the basin where it had hovered, something new remained. A single feather. White as snow. Burning within a fire. Harry stared at the feather. It lay in the center of the scorched basin like a contradiction, weightless yet heavy, delicate but indestructible. It shimmered with a faint glow that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. He reached out. The moment his fingers touched it, the world shifted again, but this time, it wasn't a vision. It was memory, real and raw. He was 12 again, standing before Fawkes in Dumbledore's office. The phoenix blinked at him, serene and eternal. Harry had asked then, does it hurt when it burns? Dumbledore had smiled gently. A phoenix does not fear fire, Harry. It is rebirth, not death. The memory faded, but the warmth remained. The feather was from the first phoenix, the primal ancestor of Fawkes and all others. a creature of the original flame. Harry slid it carefully into his robes. His wand hand trembled. Somewhere above, the chamber's exit waited. But he hesitated, sensing that leaving now would mean stepping into a world changed forever. Far across London, beneath the chaotic warmth of the magical hospital, there was a room few remembered and fewer accessed. It wasn't listed on any map. It did not heal. It contained. Ward 97 housed magical anomalies, objects and beings too strange or dangerous to be categorized. Hidden behind layers of charm and silence, it pulsed with quiet unease. And in one of its enchanted stasis cells lay a girl. She appeared no older than 15. Pale, silver-haired, her skin traced with flickering runes. She had not aged in years. Her name was Kalira. The healers didn't know her origin, only that she had been found at the edge of the veil after the final battle. Unconscious. Breathing. Unaging. And for the first time in over a decade, her eyes opened. They glowed gold. Harry stumbled back into the light above, blinking against the harsh sun filtering through the enchanted cave's mouth. His clothes were torn, skin bruised, the magic around him fraying like smoke. Waiting for him were Hermione, Ron, and, surprisingly, Draco, all three pacing in frantic silence. The moment they saw him, chaos exploded. "Where the hell were you?" Hermione shouted, tears in her eyes. "You vanished again." Ron roared, pulling him into a rough hug and then punching him lightly in the arm. "Mate, don't ever do that again." Harry held up the feather. "It gave me this." Draco stared at it. His eyes narrowed. "That's not just Phoenix." "It's older," Hermione said, already scanning it with her wand. "This isn't from a bird, it's from a being." Harry nodded. "The flame left it for me." "And something else?" "I think the world is about to come undone." Hermione looked grim. "You might be right." She pulled out a glowing parchment. St. Mungo's just activated a Class E alert. A magical sleeper awakened, one they've been keeping hidden since the war. A girl. Unidentified. But get this, she's marked with runes that match the ones we saw in the chamber. Harry froze. She was found at the Vale. "Yes," Hermione said quietly. And she just started speaking. One word. Ron raised an eyebrow. "What word?" Hermione's voice dropped. "Ekaresh." They reached St. Mungo's under illusion. The hospital was on edge, flooded with auras, unspeakables, and ministry bureaucrats trying to contain the situation. Ward 97 was sealed off, but Hermione had clearance, and where she didn't, Harry's name still held weight. Inside, the ward was quiet. Too quiet. As they approached the sealed stasis room, the alarms went off. Not loud, but low, a keening hum that made their bones ache. The doors opened without command. And Kalira sat on the bed, awake, smiling faintly. Her golden eyes fixed on Harry the moment he entered. "I know you," she whispered. "You held the flame." Harry's breath caught. "Who are you?" "I am what was left behind," she said. "The thorn of the first flame. I am the echo of the one who betrayed." Draco's wand was up instantly. "She's a fragment of Varel Toreth." "No," she said. "I am his daughter." The revelation rocked the room. Kalira explained, haltingly, painfully, that she was born not in the world above, but beneath. Her father, Varel Toreth, had created her from magic and memory, a living vessel meant to survive what he could not. She had watched the sealing of the flame from behind the veil. And now, she said, he was returning. Harry listened, heart pounding. "What does he want?" She looked at him. "You." The ministry wanted Kalira imprisoned, maybe even destroyed. But Harry refused. She wasn't just a fragment, she was a living prophecy. And he knew, somehow, that her fate was tied to his. Hermione reluctantly agreed to protect her, under heavy enchantment and constant observation. Draco, disturbingly, seemed to trust her instantly. Ron? He kept his wand close and his questions closer. But Harry? Harry saw something else in her. Not just power. Not just danger. Loneliness. The kind he recognized all too well. Beneath the oceans, in trenches no magic had touched in millennia, something stirred. A massive eye opened, golden, burning, endless. Varel Toreth had begun to wake. And the flame was no longer content to sleep. The world had changed. Not in grand explosions or public announcements, but in quiet things. In magic that no longer obeyed, in spells that fizzled and morphed, in animals who stared too long and reflections that whispered when no one spoke. Harry felt it in his core, a vibration behind the bones. The phoenix feather burned against his chest like a heartbeat, in sync with something he could not name. The moment Kalira spoke his name, it had begun. Whatever thin veil had separated prophecy from the waking world was disintegrating. He stood in the small ministry-secured flat Hermione had arranged for Kalira, a place shielded from external magic, lined with runes drawn in powdered obsidian and phoenix ash. She sat by the window, pale skin touched with sunlight for the first time in years, staring not at the sky, but at her own hands. She had asked him to sit with her. He hadn't known why he said yes. "You're quiet," she said without looking. "You said your father was Varel Toreth." She nodded slowly. "He wasn't born. Not like we understand it. He was shaped. From the first flame itself. One of the original 12 who governed the balance between will and magic. But he wanted more." Harry's voice was low. "And you?" "I was the proof of his theory," she whispered. That magic could birth more than spell work. That it could create life with purpose. I was meant to be his successor. His failsafe. Her golden eyes turned toward him, too large for her thin face. "But I chose not to be." The silence that followed was thick with things unsaid. Harry had seen weapons pretending to be people before. But she wasn't pretending. She was trying not to be. The door opened behind them. Hermione stepped in with a stack of parchments. She looked exhausted, but determined. "Things are worse than we thought. The goblin forges are reporting metal reacting to emotion. Spell ink is failing on enchanted documents. The wards around Azkaban flickered last night." Harry tensed. What are they doing about it? Blaming anomalies. Dismissing symptoms. But Harry, it's happening. The structure of magic is unraveling. The flame wasn't dormant, it was bound. And now that it's breathing again. Everything bound by it is shifting, Kalira finished, her voice like smoke. Draco arrived not long after, cloak soaked from rain, eyes colder than usual. "I got into the Black family vault." "You were right, Granger. There are records, very old ones. About Varel Toreth as exile." He laid out a scroll of worn dragonhide across the table. Faded ink formed a circular glyph, surrounded by 12 sigils. "The original council," Draco said. "The 12 pillars. Each represented a concept. Control. Rebirth. Memory. Binding. Toreth held the seat of transformation. Hermione's eye scanned the sigils. And when he fell, they didn't just banish him. They removed his name from magical memory. Harry stared. "Then how do we know it now?" "Because the veil failed," Kalira said. "And memory is returning." Ron entered, still dressed in his magical security uniform. Every Wandler's case across the UK is rising. Children manifesting fire without fuel. Old spells returning uncast. The hollow flame cult is moving again, they're recruiting from Nocturne to Paris. Harry closed his eyes for a moment. Every signal. Every sign. It was all converging. "What do they want?" Ron asked. "What's their endgame?" Calmly, Kalira said, "They want to bring him back. Fully. Not as a whisper or an echo, but as form. Reborn in flame. Through me. Hermione turned pale. But why now? Because the seal was tied to prophecy, she said. And the last prophecy tied to that flame was mine, Harry finished. Draco leaned forward. There's something else. The record said there was a counter-force. A hidden 13th, never named. Hidden in bloodlines, scattered across time. The only force that could rewrite a prophecy. Harry blinked. Rewrite? Draco nodded. Not stop. Not destroy. Change. Hermione's eyes widened. A new destiny. Calmly, Kalira looked at Harry. I think it's you. The room fell into a silence broken only by the rain. Then the walls shook. Not from magic, but from song. It echoed through the streets of London, soft, wordless, but suffused with power. A summoning. Hermione darted to the window. It's coming from everywhere. Kalira stood. Her eyes burned gold. They've begun the rite. Draco cursed. The hollow flame. Harry didn't speak. He turned to the phoenix feather. It had begun to glow again. And on it, etched in fire, was a new rune. His name. The rite had chosen its vessel. And now, the world would burn or be remade. With him at its heart. The sky above London had turned the color of soot. Not dark as night, nor grey with rain, but the heavy, unnatural pallor of a city holding its breath. All across Diagon Alley, magical windows blacked out. One sparked involuntarily. Spells misfired. Street lamps hummed in dissonant tones. Something in the bones of the world had begun to shudder. Harry, wand in hand, stepped onto the roof of the Department of Mysteries, the feather tucked close to his chest. The song was louder here, unearthly, unending. It had no lyrics, no structure, but it bore the unmistakable cadence of intention. It wasn't calling for attention. It was calling for him. Ron and Hermione flanked him, cloaked in protective enchantments, eyes fixed on the shifting sky. Draco had vanished 2 hours earlier, hunting for the song's source. And Kalira stood perfectly still, her golden eyes closed. Listening. It's a weaving spell, she said quietly. Old magic. Binding through resonance. They're stitching the veil of magic to the edge of our world, to pull him through. Harry looked at her. Can we stop it? Kalira didn't answer immediately. No, she said finally. But we can interrupt it. A new sound joined the song, thunder without storm. It rumbled from beneath the city, from ancient places untouched since the first enchantments were carved into London's foundations. The ley lines were shifting. The map of magic was being rewritten. Hermione pointed. There. The nexus. Far below, at the heart of the city, a point of blinding gold light emerged, centered in the ruins of an old cathedral buried beneath centuries of magical sealing charms. The source of the song. The hollow flame central rite. Ron swore. At the cathedral, the air was thick with heat, not just warmth, but the press of presence. Magic burned in the very mortar of the stone. Runes danced along the crumbling walls, flickering between light and shadow. And at the center, the hollow flame gathered. Hundreds of cloaked figures stood in concentric circles, chanting in silence. Each bore a brand on their forearm, the flame's sigil. Above them floated a vast orb of golden fire, twisting like a sun caught in stasis. Draco met them at the edge, blood trailing from a cut along his temple. They are not chanting. They're listening. The song isn't theirs. It's his. Harry stepped forward. We end this now. He raised his wand. The flame above reacted instantly. It surged downward, forming a shape, a figure, half-formed, cloaked in smoke, its face obscured by shadow and light. It hovered above the altar, massive and flickering, eyes glowing like molten gold. And it spoke. Ekaresh? At last, the vessel answers. The voice shattered glass for blocks. Harry's knees buckled. The feather at his chest pulsed, and the wound beneath his scar burned like fresh fire. Hermione cast a shielding spell. Kalira stepped forward. Varel, she whispered. You were supposed to remain asleep. The figure turned its gaze on her. You are my seed, girl. My fragment. My path through the veil. Why do you resist your birthright? Because I know what you really are, she said. You were never just change. You were consumption. You don't bring balance, you erase. The flame being laughed, a sound like mountains cracking. The world fears rebirth. It hides behind structure. Behind prophecy. But prophecy is just memory unspoken. I remember. He turned to Harry. You, chosen by mistake. Scarred by echo. You carry the mark of defiance. Give me the flame, and I will remake the world without pain. Harry stood. No. The word cut like ice. The flame being paused. I've lived through war, Harry said. I've seen what happens when power forgets people. You're not rebirth. You're ruin in disguise. The being roared. The cultists surged forward. Spells exploded from every direction, colorless, erratic, woven through with ancient runes that resisted counter-curses. Hermione deflected a hex that turned the air to ash. Ron shouted a warning, barely blocking a spell that sent entire pews flying. Draco dueled like a man possessed, conjuring barriers faster than they could break. And in the heart of the storm, Harry moved toward the altar. The feather at his chest glowed until it ignited. And from it, something emerged. A bird, not Fawkes. Older. Larger. Burning with blue and white fire. It screamed once, a note of perfect defiance, and flew directly into the flame being. The two collided. Light obliterated shadow. The building trembled. Kalira screamed, golden fire pouring from her eyes. Her arms raised, her voice joined the song, but she changed its key. She twisted it. Transformed it. And suddenly, everything stopped. Silence fell. The cultists collapsed. The flame being flickered. And then, Varel broke. Not shattered, but unraveled. Piece by piece, like threads pulled from an ancient tapestry. The fire dimmed. The sky brightened. And Kalira collapsed in Harry's arms. I changed the song, she whispered. Not stopped. Not ended. Just gave it another melody. Harry held her as the phoenix circled above. Harry then dropped a like on this video. The world would never be the same. But for now, it had survived. The phoenix vanished with the dawn. One moment, its wings cut through the sky like a living comet, the next, only a single feather remained, drifting gently through the ash-laced breeze and landing in Kalira's open palm. She did not stir. They had taken refuge at Grimmauld Place. It remained one of the few structures in the wizarding world that could withstand magical collapse and the presence of unstable arcane energy. The walls groaned with the memory of centuries, but it stood. Calm had returned to the world above. Magic flickered but did not rupture. Spells stuttered, but they worked. Children still levitated toys. Broomsticks still flew. But those who had witnessed the rite knew something fundamental had shifted. Harry sat beside Kalira's bed, a stack of old books at his feet. She hadn't woken in days. Her body remained warm, her pulse steady, but her magic, her presence, had dimmed, like a candle guttering beneath glass. Hermione entered with tea, setting it down with a quiet clink. Still no change. Harry shook his head. She burned too brightly. I think she gave more than she knew. Hermione knelt, drawing a gentle wand light over Kalira's forehead. Her magic's woven into the ley lines now. It's almost like she is part of the world. She rewrote the song, Harry said. She stopped him. She redirected him, Hermione corrected. Which is more dangerous in the long term. Because now he's not gone, he's dormant. And altered. The implication sat heavy between them. Ron entered a moment later, dropping a folded copy of the Daily Prophet on the table. The headline read, Ministry declares end to cult crisis, stability restored. He scoffed. They're packaging it up like it's over. They don't even mention her. Or you. Harry didn't reply. Because in truth, he didn't care about headlines. Not now. Not while she was still between sleep and silence. Elsewhere, Draco Malfoy walked the ruins of the Hollow Hearth alone. He had returned without telling anyone. The ward still hissed when he approached, recognizing his bloodline but no longer deferring to it. The stone was cold beneath his boots. And the air whispered. Not words, but patterns. Echoes. A warning. He traced the spot where the flame had once hovered. The basin was empty, but the warmth lingered. Buried deep in the scorched markings was a new rune, one that hadn't been there before. Not fire. Not rebirth. Memory. He knelt, touched it, and closed his eyes. In that moment, he saw her, Kalira. Not as she was, but as she might become. Floating above the ground. Eyes glowing like stars. Speaking in a voice not entirely her own. The prophecy hadn't ended. It had reset. Back at Grimmauld Place, Kalira opened her eyes. Harry jerked up, heart hammering. Kalira? Her lips moved. Barely. It's not done, she whispered. He leaned closer. What do you mean? She blinked slowly, as if the weight of wakefulness hurt. There's another. A gate beneath the sea. It's stirring. Harry swallowed. Varel Toreth. No, her breath caught. Worse. She closed her eyes again. But not before whispering the name. Elthamar. Harry had never heard it before. But something inside him recognized it. A presence older than flame. And hungry. Far away, beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, something opened its eyes. It had no form. No name that the world remembered. Only hunger and time. And now, it knew who had broken the silence. A ripple passed through the deep. And the world began to stir again. They had been wrong. Not about the first flame, nor the Hollow Flame cult's intentions, nor even Varel Toreth's return. They had been wrong in assuming he was the end. Because the truth Kalira whispered in her restless waking dreams was something more terrible, Varel Toreth had not been the flame's origin. He had been its guardian, a fire to light the darkness. But there had been something before fire. Something deeper, colder. A force so old it had never needed a name. Until now. Elthamar. Harry paced the black family library, his fingers brushing ancient tomes that hissed when touched. Books once locked behind generations of curses now offered their pages willingly, as if the house, or something older, had decided he needed to know. Hermione, wrapped in a blanket with quills sticking out of her hair at all angles, had collapsed across a stack of open texts. Ron had long since gone off to brief Kingsley. Draco hadn't returned from the hearth. Harry had spent the last 10 hours cross-referencing every mention of pre-flame entities, deep magic gates, and oceanic ley lines. The more he read, the clearer the shape of things became. Elthamar wasn't just a being. It was a will. It didn't desire destruction like Voldemort or conquest like Grindelwald. It desired nothing. It wanted to unmake. And the gate beneath the sea was its eye. Kalira awoke fully for the first time that evening. She sat up slowly, her skin pallid but glowing faintly, like a moon behind clouds. Harry was at her side instantly. "You're awake." "I shouldn't be," she said. "I touched it. I touched the end." "You changed the song," he said softly. "You saved us." "No," she whispered. "I delayed us. That's all." The world is on a different verse now. But the chorus always comes. He didn't understand. Not completely. But he believed her. The gate, he said. Where? She shivered. Far below. Where ley lines sink into the dark. Beneath the mid-Atlantic rift. There's a door that never opened, because the world never asked. And now it has? She nodded. Harry took a deep breath. Then we go. Getting there wasn't simple. They couldn't use standard magical transport. Portkeys fizzled in high-pressure zones. Apparition failed near ley convergencies. They needed something older, stranger. So they went to someone who had lived through the deep before. Luna Lovegood. She met them in Norway, where she'd been living in a magically protected cove, studying sea spirits and kelpie migrations. Luna hadn't changed much. Her hair was longer, silver rings adorned her ears, and her eyes were wider than ever, but behind that dreamy look, there was iron now. She had seen too much not to believe in everything. Oh, she said, when they told her. You're going to that gate. You've heard of it? Hermione asked, stunned. Luna nodded. My mum used to speak about it. She said there were creatures so old the world had to forget them to stay sane. That the sea kept their secrets because the land was too fragile to hold them. And you believe her? Ron asked. I believe she died trying to prove it. Luna led them to a ship. Not a magical one, not in the traditional sense. This was a Leviathan-class vessel built by the Greco-Roman Magical Excavation Society, equipped to withstand the pressures of underwater relic dives. She had claimed it by inheritance after the last expedition went missing. She had named it the WYRM's Dream. They set off within hours. The descent was surreal. Miles beneath the ocean, reality thinned. The further they traveled, the less sound existed. Magic didn't fail, but it twisted. Spells echoed too long. Wand-like revealed shapes that blinked in and out of awareness. The ocean watched them. It took 2 days to reach the gate. And when they did, it was unlike anything they'd imagined. It wasn't stone. Not entirely. It was chrome. Coral, crystal, bone. A massive structure rising from the ocean floor, pulsing with pale green light. Symbols moved across its surface like fish, swimming through patterns that didn't stay still. Harry stepped closer. The phoenix feather against his chest burned hotter. Kalira joined him, her hand trembling. This was the first seal, she whispered. Not the flame. This. And what's behind it? Hermione asked. Kalira turned slowly. Oblivion. The door breathed. Not like the flame. Not fire, but pressure. As though the sea itself were alive, untired. Harry raised his wand. The feather flared. The gate responded. A pulse of energy knocked them all back. Then it spoke. Not in words. But in a thought so vast it drowned all others. I see you, Light-bearer. And the gate began to open. The gate did not open in the way doors do. It dissolved. Layer by layer, the coral and bone disintegrated into glittering dust, drifting like snowfall into the blackness of the trench beyond. Water did not rush in. Pressure did not crush. Time itself hesitated. The void beyond was neither sea nor space, it was something else. Harry stood at the threshold, wand steady, his eyes locked on the emptiness. The feather pressed against his chest was no longer warm. It had gone cold. Still glowing, still alive, but changed. Behind him, Ron whispered, I'm not sure this is the kind of thing we come back from. Hermione didn't respond. She was scanning the runes that spiraled along the edges of the vanishing gate, trying to memorize them even as they slipped from reality. Kalira stepped forward. This is where they hid it, she said. The first forgetting. The place where the world abandoned the memory of Elthamar. And now we're bringing it back, Harry said. Kalira nodded. or we're here to make sure it never wakes. Draco, silent until now, muttered, either way, we're not leaving it like we found it. Luna simply stepped through. No hesitation. The sea did not follow her. The trench didn't collapse. Harry followed. Inside was dark, but not from lack of light. The kind of dark that devoured direction, orientation, self. It wasn't blackness. It was absence. And then, it wasn't. Light blossomed ahead, not magical, not artificial, but impossible. A glow made of memory. Shapes formed, vast arches of translucent bone, floating islands of stone tethered to nothing. Above, stars, not reflections, not real. Just echoes of a sky that had never existed. They floated. Gravity didn't apply. Thought guided movement. Ron looked green. Hermione stared in open awe. Draco was visibly unnerved. But Kalira? Kalira was glowing. Her skin had begun to show faint markings, runes in delicate script. Not flame runes. These were older. Smoother. Like they'd always been there, simply waiting for the right light to reveal them. This place remembers her, Luna whispered. A pulse moved through the void. A soundless wave of will. The air thickened. The light dimmed. And something noticed them. It didn't appear. It became. Not a creature, not a form, but a weight. A consciousness so vast and alien that it couldn't fit into shape. It observed them, and with that act alone, the entire place shifted. The sky cracked like glass. The ground rippled like fabric. Time spun in spirals. Hermione screamed, clutching her head, blood pouring from her nose. Ron fell to his knees. Draco gasped, hand shaking. Harry held firm. And in his chest, the feather reignited. The pressure paused. Kalira floated beside him, her hands aglow. She was no longer quite human. You are Elthamar, she said to the darkness. You are the space between fire and form. And it responded. I am the first memory. The breath before flame. The dream without name. Harry stepped forward. You tried to enter the world. I was summoned. By Varel Toreth. By prophecy. Harry swallowed. What do you want? What I have always wanted. To end. They all looked at one another. End what? Hermione rasped. Everything. So it may begin again. The void pulsed again. Shapes rose around them in mirror images. Themselves. But wrong. A version of Harry with empty eyes and a cracked wand. Hermione, robes torn, her skin etched with equations that bled. Ron, face blank, laughing soundlessly. They began to speak, all at once, in Elthamar's voice. You are the sparks. I am the stillness. You bring chaos. I bring peace. Harry stepped forward, past his own shadow. You bring silence. Silence is peace. Silence is erasure, Harry snapped. What you call peace is just forgetting. That's not rebirth, it's cowardice. Elthamar's presence wavered. Then Kalira began to sing. It wasn't music, not truly. It was language in motion, memory woven into sound. The new song. The one she had rewritten at the hollow flame. The void recoiled. Elthamar surged. But Harry raised his wand, and so did the others. They cast no spells. They only remembered. Every loss. Every laugh. Every moment that had made them themselves. Memory burned brighter than fire. And against that flame, Elthamar faltered. The presence began to collapse. It shrank, not destroyed, but contained. Bound. By memory. By song. By choice. When the void shattered, they were back aboard the ship. No time had passed. No pressure crushed. The gate was gone. And in its place, floating on the waves, was a small, glowing stone. Harry picked it up. Inside was a tiny star. Still. Breathing. Waiting. They returned in silence. The WYRM's dream sliced through calm waters under moonlight, but none of them spoke. The sea was still, unnaturally so, as though it too understood what had passed. As though it, too, was holding its breath. Harry sat at the ship's prow, the glowing stone, Delthamar's vessel, held gently in his hand. It pulsed once every few seconds, a steady rhythm like a distant heartbeat. It felt both cold and warm, empty and impossibly full. He did not know what to do with it. Kalira stood beside him, wrapped in a dark cloak. Her eyes no longer glowed, but the markings remained, runic veins across her skin, pulsing faintly with the rhythm of the stone. "You didn't destroy it," she said. "No," Harry replied quietly. "I don't think I could." She nodded. "Nor should you. It wanted to end. But it couldn't. Not really. So it waits. Now it's memory. Potential. Do you think it will come back?" Kalira was silent for a long moment. "It's not about what it will do," she said. "It's about what we forget." When they returned to London, they were met with silence. Not apathy, awe. Something had changed in the air. Wands felt lighter in hand. The magic of the city had quieted, as though the storm had passed. As though magic itself was taking a moment to breathe. They were met not by reporters, but by Kingsley himself. The minister took one look at Harry, then the stone, then Kalira, and said, simply, "Come." They met in a room beneath the ministry few knew existed. A meeting hall once used by the founder's descendants, now repurposed for emergencies of magical nature. Hermione gave the briefing. Ron supplied the blunt truth. Draco, for once, remained silent, standing behind Kalira like a bodyguard. When Harry finally placed the vessel on the table, Kingsley reached out, then stopped. He didn't touch it. "Is it safe?" he asked. "No," Harry said. "It's bound. For now. But not safe. Never safe." Kingsley's face aged 10 years in a breath. "What would you have us do with it?" Harry looked at Kalira. She looked back. And they spoke as one. "Guard it." In the weeks that followed, a strange peace fell over the wizarding world. The hollow flame scattered and fractured. Without Varel Toratha's song to bind them, they dissolved into feuds and silenced temples. The flame beast never returned. The veil at the Department of Mystery stabilized, its whispering winds calmed for the first time in decades. And Kalira, she began to live. Not just exist. She visited the world. Touched rain. Walked gardens. Spoke to people. Some feared her. Others revered her. But Harry saw something else in her, a girl trying to be human. He visited her often. And though they rarely talked about what had happened beneath the sea, their silence was not avoidance. It was understanding. Tea patrols. Just neighbors keeping watch. Just in case. One evening, months later, Harry stood again in the drawing room of Grimmauld Place. The stone still pulsed quietly in its warded vessel, now suspended in a circle of enchanted starlight. Kalira entered behind him. "I dreamed again," she said softly. He turned. "About the gate." She shook her head. "About you. About the prophecy." He waited. "You weren't the chosen one," she whispered. "That title was too small. You were the one who refused. Again and again. Refused to kill when they demanded it. Refused to surrender to flame, to fear, to forgetting." She stepped closer, and for the first time, took his hand. "And because of that, we're still here." He smiled, faintly. "You ever think we'll get a normal year?" Kalira looked around the old house, her fingers tightening on his. I think normal's overrated. Above them, the stars blinked. One, just for a moment, glowed gold. Then faded. But the world remembered. It would not forget again. It began with dreams. Not nightmares. Not visions. Echoes. Whispers passed between wandless children while they slept. Ancient spells woke in the mouths of infants. A boy in Bulgaria drew runes in the dirt that hadn't been seen since before the founding of the Roman wizarding consulate. A girl in Peru sang a lullaby that made the rivers run backward for an hour. No death. No destruction. But movement. The kind that preceded avalanches. At first, Harry thought it was just magical resonance, aftershocks from the binding of Elthamar. Magic was old. It pulsed in cycles, adapted slowly to trauma. It made sense that the world would murmur as it healed. But then the names started appearing. 12 of them. On parchment, in water, in crystal. 12 names. None familiar. None human. He sat with Hermione in the highest room of the Department of Arcane Continuity, the names laid out before them, burned into a sheet of dragonhide that refused to be erased. We don't know how they were written. Harry asked. Hermione shook her head. They weren't written. They appeared. The parchment was blank. Then the runes just formed. She tapped a wand over the first symbol. It shimmered. Translated. Vel-Syrr, the Archivist of Bones. Harry exhaled. They're not names. They're titles. Yes, Hermione said grimly. The Circle of 12. The original beings that shaped the weave of magic. Vareltoreth was one of them. Elthamar too. He frowned. And the others? She looked at him. They're waking. Kalira stood beneath the stars, her eyes closed, her skin still carrying the glow of that impossible place. She had grown thinner, quieter, but more grounded. The song no longer haunted her voice. It thrummed in her blood. When she opened her eyes, Draco was already there. You feel it too, he said. She nodded. Something is changing. Something, not evil, but indifferent. They're watching. They? She nodded toward the sky. And whispered, the rest of them. Across the world, the magical community began to fracture. Some called it evolution. Others, prophecy fulfilled. Magical radicals started branding themselves with new sigils, symbols no one had seen but all somehow remembered. Not the hollow flame. Something older. The Ember Circle. They did not seek chaos. They sought return. A return to magic as it had once been, alive, wild, unstructured. A world where wands were tools, not limits. Where spells sang instead of spoke. Their leader, a masked figure known only as Nethril. They did not preach conquest. They preached unweaving. And many listened. Harry stood again before the warded vessel that held the bound Elthamar stone. It pulsed gently, almost affectionately, like a heart dreaming of stillness. But now, it pulsed in harmony with something else. Something approaching. Kalira stepped beside him. You think they're coming for it? He asked. She shook her head. No. They're coming for you. Harry closed his eyes. Because I wouldn't choose silence. Because you remembered, she said. Because you refused to forget. And outside, the wind shifted. Not in weather. But in will. They came without warning. No fanfare. No dark clouds or bolts of green light. No army. Just one figure. She appeared in the heart of Diagon Alley, veiled in ash-colored robes, her face hidden behind a mask of beaten copper. No wand. No words. No threat. But every magical ward within 100 meters went still. Shops locked themselves. Windows refused to reflect her. Owls took to the sky, screeching. She didn't move. She simply waited. The ministry arrived in force within minutes. But she asked for only one person. Harry Potter. Harry walked through the protective spells around the alley, Wand at his side, the feather tucked inside his robes as always. Hermione tried to stop him. So did Ron. Even Kingsley sent a personal message, if you go to her, you go alone. He went anyway. When he stepped into the street, the world held its breath. She turned slowly as he approached, and Harry could feel it, the pulse of magic, alive in her like a living song. Not like the flame. Not like Elthamar. Older. Simpler. Like the rhythm of something waking from centuries of stillness. Her voice was calm. You remember the shape of fire, Harry Potter? But do you remember what came before the spark? He didn't answer. She removed her mask. She was young. Too young. No older than Kalira. But her eyes? They held centuries. You are not our enemy, she said. You are our warning. I don't want to be either, he said. We know, she replied. Then she pulled from her cloak a stone. Identical to Elthamar's. But dark. Cold. No one bound this one, she said. Because it was never meant to be hidden. It chose slumber. What is it? He asked. Memory, she said. But not of one mind. Of many. The Ember Circle was born not to destroy, but to wake. To prepare. Because one by one, the 12 are stirring. And when they return, your world will need more than spells and bloodlines. Harry swallowed. So what do you want? She looked up at him. To offer you a place among us. Back at Grimmauld Place, the war room flared with argument. Hermione paced furiously. You can't join them, Harry. You don't know who they are. They didn't threaten us, he said. They warned us. That's how it starts, Ron said. Next thing you know, they're replacing every magical foundation in Britain. They're not trying to conquer, Ron. They're trying to adapt. To what? Hermione snapped. Ancient gods? Primal magic? We barely survived Vareltoreth and Elthamar. What if the others aren't so kind? Harry looked at the ember stone on the table. And wondered if the future was already here. Kalira watched him from the corner. She said nothing for a long time. Then finally, softly, she said, "They're not wrong." Everyone turned. "I am a weapon," she said. "I was made to channel forgotten forces. I can feel what's coming. I don't know their names, but I know their shape. And they won't be like Elthamar. They won't speak. They won't ask. They'll just take." Harry nodded slowly. "Then maybe," he said, "it's time we learn to speak their language." Outside, the world still spun. But the stars above began to shift. Realigning. Forming patterns once erased. The 12 were not just waking. They were returning. And Harry Potter stood on the line between history and myth. Again. They met him in the woods. Not in some ancient fortress or chamber of stone, but a clearing surrounded by trees older than Hogwarts itself. Pines stretched like silent sentinels toward the stars, and in their shade sat 12 figures. No masks. No titles. Just people. Old and young. Some wore robes. Others dressed like muggles. One held a lyre. Another wove smoke between their fingers. They watched Harry not with suspicion, but with expectation. Nethril stood at the center, her copper mask gone. Her face was young, yes, but her eyes still burned with something beyond age. "You came. I said I would. And you brought no wand." Harry nodded. "You asked me to listen." One of the 12, a woman with ash-grey hair and fingers stained with ink, spoke first. "He carries the song of flame. The scar of prophecy. The tether of memory. But does he understand what we are?" Harry stepped forward. "I think you're trying to rewrite the ending." A man to her right chuckled. "Not rewrite. Remember." Another added, "Your world teaches magic like arithmetic. Fixed. Linear. It was never meant to be caged." "You're trying to free it," Harry said. "No," Nethril replied. "We're trying to prepare it. The Circle of 12 is not legend. It is cycle. They come back. Not as gods or tyrants, but as force. As hunger. As balance. Each return is louder. Closer." She stepped toward him, palms open. "You stopped the flame. You bound the void. But what comes next will not ask to be understood." Harry looked down at the dark ember stone in her hand. It did not glow. It waited. "What do you want from me?" "Not worship," she said. "Not leadership," added the lyre player. "Not blood," said another. Nethril raised her hand. "Witness." The forest around them changed. Not physically, but in perception. Harry saw worlds. A chamber of crystal, floating in the heart of a dying star. A city carved from thought, populated by beings of pure spellwork. A child birthing fire through song. A woman unweaving time to rescue a lost love. All of them real. All of them possible. And at the center of it all, 12 thrones. 11 occupied. 1 empty. Each bearer before you chose how to respond to the circle's return, Nethril said. Most with fear. Some with control. A few with awe. And me? Harry asked. You refused, she said softly. Every time. To kill. To conquer. Even to yield. You are not the last light, Harry Potter. You are the threshold. The ember stone lifted into the air. It hovered before him. Waiting. If you accept it, Nethril said, you become the bridge. Not the judge. Not the weapon. The voice. The world will change. But this time, it will remember why. Harry looked at the stone. Then back at the council. He thought of Hermione, furiously flipping pages. Of Ron, standing between a curse and a stranger. Of Draco, stubborn and scarred. Of Luna, writing backward to dream forward. Of Kalira. Of every name the world forgot to say aloud. He reached out. The stone flared. Not in heat. In recognition. Back in Grimmauld Place, the vessel containing Elthamar's stone pulsed in rhythm with the ember stone now bound to Harry's hand. The house did not resist it. The magic of the black bloodline did not flare. Instead, for the first time in recorded history, Grimmauld Place grew quiet. Content. Kalira stood in the hall, watching. You did it. No, Harry said. We did. She smiled. And behind her, the lights flickered. Stars realigned. And far, far away, the last of the 12 stirred. Its eyes opened. And it whispered a single word. Soon. For weeks, the world held its breath. Not from fear. From knowing. Witches and wizards everywhere reported strange flickers in their spells. In forests, centaurs looked to the skies and found new constellations written in forgotten patterns. Goblins halted trade, sensing a deeper shift in the flow of earth magic. The merfolk beneath the Black Lake sang songs with no known origin, but every child who heard them dreamed of fireless suns and doors carved from starlight. And above it all, Harry Potter carried the Ember Stone. Not wielded. Worn. It hovered over his heart like a third soul, Elthamar's flame now balanced by this new, silent force of memory and song. He could feel the rhythm of the magical world. Not just spells, but intention. Magic born not in the mind, but in the breath. And then it happened. The sky turned silver. Just once. All across the world, day paused. Time stilled. and the 12th light fell from the heavens. He stood in the center of Stonehenge, surrounded by ley lines converging like veins in a heart. The ancient stones glowed with internal fire, pulsing in sync with the ember stone. Kalira stood to his left, veiled in twilight and memory. Nethril stood to his right, her mask returned, but her silence heavier. The circle had returned. And one seat remained. Not a throne, but a mirror. Rising from the earth, shaped not of stone, but of reflection. Harry stepped toward it. The wind died. The air spoke. Not in words. In understanding. This is not the end of magic. This is the beginning of choice. One by one, the members of the Ember Council stepped forward. Each laid their hand on the mirror. Each whispered a word that only they remembered. And when Harry touched it, the mirror did not show his reflection. It showed everyone. Ron. Hermione. Draco. Luna. Kingsley. The Fallen. The Lost. The Unknown. The children who dreamed. The enemies who repented. The strangers who lit candles in the dark. All of them. Because he wasn't the chosen. He wasn't the flame. He was the thread. The one who remembered what it meant to be afraid and still stand. To be wrong and still try. To lose and still hope. The mirror shattered. The sky tore. And magic changed. Not violently. Kindly. They called it the renewal. Not an event. A choice. Spells became subtler, richer, alive with possibility. New schools of magic appeared, not by decree, but by discovery. Wands began responding to emotion as much as command. Magical creatures born from myth began returning, not as beasts, but as beings. Kalira became the first keeper of the new circle, traveling across the world, guiding the young and the forgotten. Hermione became the headmistress of a rebuilt department, not of law, but of legacy. Ron built homes for the ones left behind. Magical and muggle alike. Draco became the first diplomat to the Wandless, who had once hidden in fear. And Harry? He disappeared. Not to vanish. To watch. To make sure the world remembered not just its magic, but its people. Grimmauld Place still stands. And somewhere within its shifting halls, a single feather rests on a desk no one touches. Beside it, 2 stones. One burning. One still. And behind them all, a story. Not forgotten. In the years after Voldemort's fall, Harry Potter thought the world had finally healed. But peace, as he discovered, is not the same as rest, and magic, ancient and wild, was only ever slumbering. It began with a forgotten prophecy hidden in the deepest chamber of the Department of Mysteries. An orb that called his name, and a single word from a language that hadn't been spoken in centuries, Ekoresh. What followed was a journey across the living history of magic itself, one that led Harry through vaults of memory, chambers of flame, and oceans that held gates no human was meant to open. He met Kalira, a girl born not of blood, but of memory, shaped by the first flame and carrying the echo of Varel Toreth, the oldest of the 12. Together, they faced a rising tide of ancient forces, a cult of silence, a being made of unmaking, and the slow return of a circle that predated Hogwarts, wands, and even death itself. Harry did not win by conquest. He did not destroy the enemy. He refused. Refused to forget. Refused to kill. Refused to let magic become a cage. In the end, he became not the chosen one, but the bridge, the one who stood between the old world and the new, not to judge, but to remember. To remind magic, and those who wield it, that power without people is empty, and that the greatest spell of all is choice. Now, the Ember Circle watches. The stars burn in new shapes. And somewhere, in a quiet house full of creaking wood and starlit dust, a feather waits beside 2 stones. One pulsing with fire. One silent with memory. Both dreaming. Just like magic always has. Oh, you're still awake. Heh. I thought I'd put you to sleep with all that talk of flames and gates and very serious magical councils. But since your eyes are still open, let me tell you something. I didn't tell you about the feather that vanished. Oh, not Harry's phoenix feather, no, not the one that burned and chose and carried all that prophecy weight. This was a different one. A single feather that fell, unnoticed, from the sky the night the Ember Mirror shattered. It drifted all the way to a quiet village in the Scottish Highlands, where a little girl named Mirren, who'd never done a single magical thing in her life, woke up glowing. Just faintly. Just enough for the runes on her bedroom walls to blink awake for the first time. And when she picked up the feather, she didn't burst into flame or speak a prophecy. She just smiled. And the whole room sighed, as if it had been holding its breath for years. Mirren doesn't go to Hogwarts. Not yet. But she hears magic. Like a hum in the trees and a rhythm in the rain. And one day, she's going to find something buried under her grandmother's garden, a key with no door. And when she turns it, the world doesn't explode. It shifts. Ever so slightly. Mirren McGraw felt it before she saw it. A tremble, soft and deep, like the earth itself drawing breath. She held the old key in her hand, cool and heavy, shaped like a spiral made of thistle roots and gearwork metal. It clicked once, then rotated half a turn more, as if unlocking something not in the shed's floor, but beneath the very bones of the hill. The key didn't open a door. It planted one. Right there in the middle of her grand's moss-covered garden, where the mushrooms grew in rings and the old scarecrow sometimes whistled when it rained. And then the ground bloomed. Not with flowers. With memory. Roots twisted upward, forming a tangled arch, carved with tiny runes that shimmered in moonlight. The moss around it curled back like curtains drawn wide. No hinge. No knob. Just a faint humming sound from within, like a lullaby sung backward. Mirren, age 11, barefoot and wrapped in her dad's old Quidditch jersey, blinked at the new gate. Gran, she called softly. But Gran was asleep deep inside the cottage, curled under patchwork quilts that smelled of peppermint and dust. The feather still glowed on Mirren's desk inside, pulsing gently like it always did since the day she'd found it nestled in her windowsill after the Silver Sky night. That night when the stars rearranged. Mirren didn't know much about magic. She'd never been to Diagon Alley. Never held a wand. But she heard things. In the grass. In the wind. In the slow ticking rhythm beneath the garden soil. And now there was a gate. Waiting. So she stepped through. The world on the other side wasn't like stepping into a new place. It was like stepping into a forgotten place. The light was soft and green, not from a sun, but from the trees themselves. Their bark glowed faintly, etched with golden spirals and clockwork symbols that moved very, very slowly. The air smelled of mint and deep oak and something like remembering. And far ahead, nestled in the roots of a seed of echo. Hearken. Mirren froze. Who are you? The Clockroot remembers. You are its key. The cycle stirs. The page turned. Symbols flowed across it, becoming shapes, then faces, some strange, some familiar. And at the center, a tree of fire, split down the middle, one side burning, one side glowing with stars. Mirren reached out. The feather pulsed in her bedroom. Far above, in a ministry library no one had entered in months, a copy of the Atlas of Magical Harmonics opened to a blank page. And wrote her name. The moment Mirren touched the page, the world turned inside out. She didn't feel herself fall, but she knew she had. Not like falling downstairs, or even falling in dreams. This was deeper. Like falling through memory. Through roots. When she opened her eyes, she was standing on the ceiling of the garden shed. Except it wasn't her shed anymore. It was taller. Endless. The walls were bookshelves growing moss and tiny vines. The lanterns were floating feathers. Time ticked not in seconds, but in names whispered once per breath. And in the center, standing beside a crooked grandfather clock shaped like a sleeping man, was a girl. Roughly Mirren's age. With hair the color of charcoal and eyes like candlelight. "You're late," the girl said. Mirren blinked. "For what?" "For remembering." She stepped forward and offered a hand. "I'm Auror." "Mirren." Their hands touched. Not warmly, but familiarly. Like they'd once shared a cradle in a dream neither had told the other about. Auror led her through the shed-turned hallway, past doors that opened onto mountains, oceans, one that breathed. "You're a Woundkeeper," Auror said casually. "A what?" "Someone who carries forgotten magic." "Unasked." "Unchosen." "But important." "I didn't ask to be anything," Mirren said, a bit defensive. "Neither did I," Auror replied. "But the Clockroot doesn't give keys to birds." They passed a long mirror. Their reflections weren't exact. In Mirren's reflection, her hair glowed faintly gold, and she had antlers. In Auror's, she had no face, only a swirl of ink and sky. They came to a garden, not Gran's garden, but a garden made of seeds. Floating in the air, each wrapped in light. "These are wounds," Auror said. "Seeds, you mean?" "No. Wounds." She plucked one. "This is the day a girl in 1742 tried to bind lightning to her heartbeat. It didn't work. But the attempt became a spell." She plucked another. "This is the grief of a centaur who watched stars die." Mirren touched one. It sang. And in her mind, she saw a castle underground where children drew spell runes with their blood, not out of cruelty, but hope. Because the world above had forgotten them. "What happens to them?" she asked. "If no one remembers," Auror said softly. "They rot. And magic forgets how to feel." Mirren looked around. All these wounds. All these forgotten stories. What does that make us? Auror smiled. "Gardeners." They returned to the book. Its pages had flipped on their own. A new symbol pulse now. The same as the gate in Gran's garden. But below it, something darker. A shadow. Moving. "You saw that?" Auror asked, eyes wide. "That's not supposed to happen." "What is it?" "Something that isn't a wound," Auror whispered. "Something that eats wounds." A book closed in the distance with a noise like thunder. The Clockroot trembled. "Mirren," Auror said carefully, "I think something's coming. Something that doesn't want magic to remember." Mirren turned to the pedestal. The book was gone. And the light was flickering. Then a voice, not one she knew, slid across the air like oil. "So many flowers, so little fire." Auror paled. "We need to run." Outside, in the world of waking, the feather on Mirren's desk cracked. Not broken. Opened. From inside spilled not flame, but ink. And it began to write on its own. In a language not spoken in over 1,000 years. Mirren ran. Not because she was afraid, though she was. Not because the walls of the Clockroot garden were starting to twist like tired paper, though they were. She ran because the light behind her was failing. The book was gone. The gate had pulsed once and then stopped. And somewhere in the hallways of impossible memory, something was walking without sound. "Where are we even going?" she hissed to Auror. "To the deep shelf," Auror said, pulling her through a door that opened into a room made entirely of threads. "It's where forgotten magic gets filed before it disappears forever. It's where the next keeper is chosen." "I'm not a keeper." "You turned the key, Mirren." "Because it was under a potato crate." Auror spun, breathing hard. "The Clockroot doesn't care where it puts the key. It cares who hears it turn." They stopped in a chamber so wide Mirren couldn't see the ceiling. Shelves reached into skyless dark. Each one carried a memory seed, glowing or dimming depending on the hour. At the center, a pulpit. Not grand. A single stool. A single feather. And a small silver cup full of black water. Auror looked at her. Sit. Mirren stared at it. What happens if I do? You remember what everyone else forgot. Is it going to hurt? Yes. She Saturday. The moment she did, the seeds in the chamber flared. Thousands of lights. And then, voices. Soft. Loud. Weeping. Singing. Screaming. Laughing. A centaur's lullaby. A wandless boy writing fire into stone. A mermaid who could breathe above water, but no one listened. Memories. Not hers. Now hers. They poured into her, not as pain, but presence. Each a weight. Each a promise. And at the edge of the shelf, the thing arrived. Not shadow. Absence. Like someone had scraped a hole in the world and left the scrape to grow teeth. Auror screamed, casting a light ward. It passed through it. The thing turned toward Mirren. It had no shape. But it smiled anyway. Little gardener, it said, what makes you think the world wants to remember? Mirren stood. Hand shaking. Heart pounding. She picked up the silver cup. Drank the water. Her skin turned gold. Her eyes turned wild. And the seeds began to sing. She didn't fight the creature. She named it. A name that hurt her throat and bent the air. It froze. Shrieked. And turned to dust. Auror stared. What was that? I don't know, Mirren whispered, collapsing. But it forgot what it was. So I remembered it. And just like that, the clockroot hummed. And the feather flew to her palm. Whole again. Back in her room, Mirren awoke gasping. The garden gate was gone. But the soil was soft. And on her desk, a new key. And beside it, the note. The world is full of wounds. Don't let them rot. The keeper who wasn't. She picked it up. Smiled. And whispered, I'll keep them. At first glance, the Clockroot Gate appears to be a whimsical side tale, new characters, a mysterious key, and a hidden magical realm wrapped in vines and song. But underneath, it's something deeper. A quiet echo of the monumental events of the main story, and a meditation on the aftershocks of remembering. While Harry's story was about defying destiny and redefining prophecy, Mirren's story is about what happens after. After the battles are over. After the Ember Circle reawakens ancient forces. After magic itself begins to evolve. Harry was the bridge between old and new, the bearer of memory and fire. Mirren is the gardener of what that new world leaves behind. Where Harry faced cosmic forces like Vareltoreth and Elthamar, beings who embodied flame and void, Mirren faces something even quieter and more insidious, forgetting. The loss of magic not through violence, but through neglect. The rot of wonder buried beneath the noise of a changing world. The Clockroot represents the magical world's unwritten history, the stories too small or strange or sad to be part of the official record. And Mirren, by turning the key, becomes their steward. A Woundkeeper. Not a warrior, not a chosen one, but someone who listens when the world forgets. It's a small story. But it matters. Because in the end, Harry changed the shape of magic by remembering who he was. And Mirren ensures it never forgets why it matters.